Welcome to Things My Mother Forgot to Mention.
The podcast where we say everything our mothers didn't.
I'm Jan, a trauma therapist and author turned rogue storyteller, here to talk openly about the body, aging, and all the, wait, what? Moments of womanhood.
And I'm Patty, an online business and tech nerd whose purpose is to elevate the voices of women in our world and who doesn't believe in taboo topics. Things My Mother Forgot to Mention is the podcast for every woman who's ever said, wait, why didn't anyone mention this to me?
Join Jan and Patty, two outspoken, curious, outrageous women, as they dive headfirst into a messy, magical, and often WTF realities of aging, health, and quite simply being a woman.
From rogue chin hairs and vaginal thinning
to mental health, perimenopause, and scalp cancer. Yes, really.
Nothing is off limits. It's funny, it's raw, it's real talk your mother definitely skipped.
Let's get into it.
Hey, Jan.
Hey there, Patty. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm trying to stay cool today.
Yeah.
It's a little hot and humid here, but can you hear my air conditioner? Is it making too much noise? Okay, good. Okay. And how about you?
I'm good. It's always hot here, but my AC is working now this year. So I'm
That's right. Texas.
happy as can be.
Texas is hot.
Yeah. I'm excited. So the last episode, we talked about our experiences with relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So this time we've brought somebody in to talk about relationships.
Yeah.
And her relationships. Yeah.
This is a good colleague of mine for 20 years, Lisa?
Yeah, it's been a long time.
So let me read a little bit about your experience and see what you think. Is that all right?
Yeah,
so,
good.
Lisa, you are your typical relationship coach. You have over 20 years of experience as a relationship coach and trained therapist. She cuts through the fluff and gets straight to the heart of the matter. That's Lisa. Lisa tackles complex issues head on with clarity, humor, and a no-nonsense approach that drives real, lasting change. Her mission is to help individuals, couples, teams, and organizations create radically new relationships and cultures that don't just survive, they thrive. The old relationship rules are broken, and Lisa is here to rewrite them. Through her radically new relationships paradigm, she challenges outdated norms and replaces them with bold, transformative framework. Her approach ensures relationships are deeply supportive, powerfully connected, and built to last. Wow. What's that like to hear?
I know. That's like really funny. I'm like, where'd you get that?
Well, it's all true.
And we failed to mention Lisa Merlo-Booth is your full name. And so welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. Thank you. This is fun. Oh my gosh. Jan, it's so much fun being back with you.
I know.
It's like, gosh, we have a long history.
How long have you guys known each other? And how did you meet, if you don't mind me asking?
We met through Terry Real. And I started working with him in 2003. And Lisa, I think you came that year or the year after, 2004?
I think I was I don't remember, honestly. I was in a supervision group before that for like 2 years working with Terry. Through people that I had worked with. I didn't know them, but they were in it and they invited me in that supervision group. And so I was in that supervision group, and then he was doing a week-long workshop, and I went to that workshop, and I don't know if that was, were you at that, Jan? Jan started the Institute, so the Institute hadn't started yet. And I think he was just doing one thing, but then when the Institute started, I don't know how I got pulled into the Institute with you. I don't remember anyway, because whatever. It was
the
something.
Answer to that is it's been a long time. So 2000, let's say 4. So that's like 21 years we've known each other.
Jeez, that's crazy. Yeah. Think of how young we were when we first met, Jan.
Yeah, we were young. I was young then. And mostly since we were working with Terry and Terry Real, he was about relationships. And so Lisa
Yeah.
has kind of veered off Patty into what's healthy relationships. And I've really kind of stayed in the track of with Pia Melody on individual complex trauma, working with relational and developmental trauma. So we kind
Yeah.
of separated after, gosh, maybe 6 years, 5 years working with him or something. Anyway, but it's a long story, but
Yeah.
Lisa is an expert.
Yeah, she is. And I know. So I've been working with Lisa for about 7 years, and Lisa is the one who introduced me to Jan. But none of us, we have not all three been together to hang out
I
and
know.
chat.
It's
So I'm
That's so
really
awesome.
cool.
excited. Um,
This is fun.
yeah, it's super fun. So what do you want to start sharing a little bit, Lisa, about some things your mother forgot to mention about relationships?
Oh my gosh, everything.
Everybody says that.
Yeah.
Really,
Right?
that's
Like I
been a
don't,
common answer.
Hmm.
yeah, it's funny. One of my attractions to couples work was because of my parents' relationship. Like,
Mhm.
it was very traditional, very patriarchy, like on steroids. My dad he was a rager, and so it really burned me that nobody, and they went to many couples therapists, and nobody ever called my dad out. And so that was my attraction to Terry, because
Yes.
Mm.
finally somebody was calling out men. So what I watched is my dad rage and my mom cower, and all me and my siblings all cower and go silent.
Yep.
And so it was a lifetime of walking on eggshells and like, don't set dad off. Um and what was also hard is going out in public. My dad could be very charismatic and fun, and he also was very generous, like to everybody. And so just that, um like, what the hell, you bring the best of you out to the world, and in your
And you,
home, like, this
yep.
is going on. And so there was not a lot of, I don't, like, honestly, I don't remember my mom telling me anything about relationships until um, probably like I was much older, and more about like when I'd be like, why are you staying? Why did you stay with dad for so long? And then she would tell me, well, what my mother said was, you made your bed, now you lie in it.
Oh,
Oh,
great.
wow.
Um, and so that was her, she's like, that's just what I knew. And she was always like, as long as I didn't even know, like, emotional abuse, I didn't know that raging and yelling and all of that was abuse to me was if you got hit. And as long as you didn't get hit, this is
Right.
just what was happening, you
Right.
know?
I think that's really common. People think abuse
Yeah,
is just being physically hit, and
Yeah.
it's not. It's
Yeah.
so much
right.
more than that.
Yeah.
So
And
much more than
especially in
that.
older generations, I feel like because there was that idea where divorce was much more taboo in older generations,
Yes.
and it was considered more of a failing. And,
Yeah.
but I agree, like there's a lot of like, well, you just sort of deal with it. That's what you got. You married. That's your, and that's what
Yes.
men do. And, I think,
Yeah. And, there were five of us. So I was the baby
Wow.
of five, and my mom's job was in the home. So what was she going to do? Right.
right.
It's very hard to leave when you don't have money, you don't have a job, and and religious Catholic, you don't divorce. There's so much there. Um, And the other thing that she did say was, my dad, when she was dating my dad, and there was a 7-year age difference. So she was 19, he was like, 25 or whatever. And so the one thing that she did say was that when he asked her to marry him, she hesitated because he was jealous. And so she went back to her mom to ask, to say this. And her mom's like, be careful about jealousy. You have to make sure that you can live with that jealousy for the rest, forever. And so that was the one thing my mom, talked about is jealousy. I thought I could change him. Jealousy won't ever change somebody. So you got to, be careful about that. That was probably the one thing that I remember her.
That's really interesting too, because I've heard a lot of people that they get bothered if their partner isn't showing some sort of jealousy. Like somehow jealousy for some people translates to you care about me. If you're jealous,
Yes.
you care. So I really
Yeah.
love at least that she was like red
But
flag at least a little bit, you know?
yeah, jealousy though is almost like today, like you're my possession. And if
Right.
anyone looks at you different or tries to touch you or whatever, then I have the right to,
Yeah.
punch you
Yeah.
or
Well,
whatever.
it's
Yeah.
very controlling and
Yes,
and it comes from a place of insecurity
patriarchal.
right. Well, and so what I took from that is if you are with a boyfriend or girlfriend or whoever who's jealous, you need to set a limit very, very quick. Like it's got to be a hard line. Look, that's not working for me. So if they can't change it, leave. It's just a pattern that gets worse and worse, and it starts making your life smaller and smaller, which is what I saw with my mom. I just
Yeah,
saw like they would have friends and then all of a sudden he'd be jealous of their friends and he was looking at you and um she just made her life smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller because of his jealousy.
Yeah.
And so I just like that was one thing that was definitely a seed. And I see it with when I work with couples, like that's a tremendous red flag. And you're right, Patty, because people are like, oh, that just means he loves me. Look at,
Yeah.
and like, oh, he ordered my meal. Look
Oh
at, he told me what
gosh.
to order. And it's like, oh my gosh, red flag, red flag,
Yeah.
red flag, you know? And
Yeah.
so, yeah,
so what do you wish your mom had said to you
oh my
about
gosh,
dating
so
and
much.
choosing men?
So much that I think the one of the most important is listen, more than anything, what's important is how they treat you and how you feel in their presence in
Hmm,
public
great.
and in private.
Hmm.
Like that, like those two have to that is way more important than how they look, what they do, right? How much money they have. um, that's way more important. And it's not about men taking care of you, or women, whatever. It's really about when I leave this person's presence or when I'm in their presence and I'm like, oh, I feel good about me. I feel good about us. I can feel how they treat you. That's more important than anything else. And God, there's so many. Don't fall in love with somebody's potential. Do you know how many people
Oh
never
my
reach their
gosh.
potential?
How
Oh my
many?
gosh. Like
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
90% of people never reach their potential,
Right.
you know?
Yeah. People fall in love with
Um,
an idea of a person, and that is
yes.
such
Yes,
a
that's right.
problem. I think that was part of my challenge in my first relationship too,
Mm.
is because I was always like, well, if he was sober, he
Yes, yeah.
like,
It'd be great.
okay, but that's not what's
Right.
actually happening. So we need to look at that. But I think
Yes.
that's that idea of like we like to project our ideals on somebody.
Yeah.
We foresee them able to do, but it's like if they're not there in that now, why like that idea of
Right.
waiting for somebody to change and hoping for somebody to change. There's
Right.
lots of that out
Or
there.
thinking you can change them.
Right.
Like if
Yeah.
I just,
Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I can motivate them. I can
Yeah.
make them do this. I can make them nicer. I can whatever.
Mhm. And then you
And
spend all
then
your time trying to find the right thing to say to motivate. Like, what is, and that's not the
right.
right thing. I have to try something else. And like, that is,
Yeah. And then
yeah.
their failure becomes your failure. And it's like
Mhm.
what?
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. That would definitely be one of them. People are going to do what they're going to do. I'm not causing, I don't set people off. Like that whole thing with my dad's anger, like he had that issue. That was his problem. It was his issue. I didn't cause it. I didn't make five kids didn't make him blow up. My mom didn't make him blow up. I wish, I think that's a really important piece of information that you're not responsible for how people talk to you, how what sets them off, what that whole piece, you know?
That's their
Yeah.
trauma.
It's their trauma.
Uh-huh.
I never heard the word trauma. I didn't even know what the hell is trauma.
What is that? Right.
Yeah.
Never heard any of that.
That's his, or I always say unhealed, or untreated part of them that never got treated. And so, you don't have
Right.
to use the word trauma. People kind of get reactive when they hear that word, but your dad was very
Right.
untreated, and so it was expressed in the family. And so, I was just thinking as you're listening, what you said, Patty, what you about if he would only stop drinking, then it would be a perfect relationship. And I was thinking, so what my mom never said anything either, but I always used to always think watching TV or movies where couples, fall in love and they have these torrid, mad sex scenes and affairs and goes on like that. I'm thinking that's got to be relationship. That's what
Right.
relationships are about. The guy
Yeah.
that looks good and does all that.
Yes.
And I got to tell you, that was a theme in how I was raised in my family, I would have to say.
Oh, interesting.
And that idea of it's supposed to be passionate and
It's
intense.
passionate all the time. And
Yeah,
yeah.
that's a joke. I mean,
Yeah.
now after 35 years, I realize that's just the top, that's the icing. It's really relationship
Yeah.
goes so much deeper, and so it was just interesting you saying that about what it's like, what your mom didn't tell you. My mom never, I mean, she kept saying, "Oh, you'll know when you find him." I'm like, "I'll know? What am I gonna
You
know?
know, how do I know? What do I
How do
know?
I
Right.
know?"
Magic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but like for me growing up, there was a lot of pressure. Do you have a boyfriend? Do you have a boyfriend? Do you have
Oh
a
yeah.
boyfriend? Are you getting married? Are you like, and then my friends would get married. And if I wasn't married yet, it was like, it was so tied to, am I worthy enough? Am I
You're
pretty
right.
enough?
Your
Am I,
identity. Right. You're worthy.
and a lot was about looks. A lot was
Oh yeah.
about
Yeah.
looks. And yeah, that was like, I
Yeah.
always felt less than if I didn't have a boy. Like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? And that I would say is such an important message to, oh my gosh, to men and women, but particularly to girls. You know, don't ever tie your worth to anybody.
Yeah.
I like anybody. I don't care. If you don't have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, that's okay.
Yeah.
You can have them or not. Like, like it's up to you.
Yeah.
But man, when I was growing up, it was you were worthy if you had a boyfriend. If you were pregnant, like that's even better. Like all these
Yeah.
things that it was never about who you were.
Yeah.
It was really about who you have on your side, who's. And
Yeah.
I would say that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Drop that quick.
I
Drop
think
that quick.
I think there's two things that kind of came up there. One is like if we think about like how often do you hear people when they're talking about kids and stuff, and they don't mean it in a squidgy way, but they're like, he's just going to be a knockout. All the girls are going to be like, even at that, right?
Yes.
At younger ages,
Yes.
we start looking at kids and we're immediately going, oh, they're going to be
Objectifying them. Yes.
objectifying
Yes.
and but looking at it in
Yeah.
that perspective of that's what so much of our being is here, like we're here
Yeah.
for a relationship. And I remember when I was in high school, and I talked about this a little bit in our episode of like I didn't date a lot in high school. I wasn't sort of the natural beauty and I wasn't outgoing, and so, but I had a lot tied up in that idea of like, well, but nobody wants me, so I'm a piece of garbage. Like I'm not worth it.
Yes.
And that stuff
Yeah.
that I literally to this day am working on in therapy, because there's so much of the world all the time that's telling you if somebody doesn't want you, if somebody doesn't love you, you're not worth anything. And so it's like
Yeah.
getting to that point of like that's a lot of the healing work I'm doing now is like no, like I get to decide what I'm worth, and
Yes.
like
Yeah.
my who I'm with, my size, like my body, like none of that determines my worth. It's literally
Right.
me as a human, because
Yeah.
I would be the same person if any one of those factors change, right? Whether
Yeah.
with somebody, whether I'm this or that, or, the work I'm doing, like I'm still me at the core. And so I think that's such an
Yeah.
important thing that we don't talk about. We don't get into that, and that's tied up in relationships as well. So we look for somebody and hope for somebody, which is why I think a lot of times people settle or they get into relationships because like, well, somebody finally loves me and that means I'm worth something. So I might
Right.
just stay here because what if I leave this person and nobody else comes and nobody else loves me, right?
Sounds
I
a
think
lot
that
like self-esteem
Yeah,
it is. It's
issues
so
absolutely.
much self-esteem.
of
But
Yeah.
our whole culture is self-esteem is very from the outside in. It's not the
right.
inside out. And for women, it's all about looks. I had this, oh, it was so creepy. I remember a mom with the baby was like 8 months old. And she's like, "Oh, look at he's such a little football player." She's like, "Ooh, look at him. He's flirting with you." And I was like, "I that is so gross." Like
Yeah.
like what? No, he's not. He's a baby. Like
Right.
and so I remember that and I've had couples literally so talk about objectifying and like where in their prenup they put how much that she can weigh and how
What?
much like and how much sex they had to have
Oh
every we
my
have to have sex
God.
and I
I'm
was like you
sorry.
signed that
Oh
like
my gosh.
what and it's
She
like
sounds like a sex worker or a slave. Oh my
right
How
God.
and
awful is
so
that?
that's the other thing I wish that I was told like you don't this is male or female you don't owe your spouse sex.
Mm,
You don't have like you want to have a sexual marriage because it is um it brings connection. It's a
Right.
way of bringing you
Vibrant. It's
closer,
connected. Hmm.
right? It's not because you owe it to me and this is the contract that you're doing. And so many couples, and this is my parents were actually very passionate with each other and had zero emotional connection. None. Like
mm,
my dad, you couldn't have a conversation with him. He, like, you just couldn't. And every time my mom would try to bring something up, he'd be like, don't talk about that. Like, don't put that out in the world. Don't put that out in the world. It was
oh,
like so weird.
See, this is where
I
I
don't
get
know.
into that parents who are untreated
Yeah.
and have poor marriages are the template for all of us growing up. So my template is my family I grew up in, which is really dysfunctional. What you're talking about
Yeah.
is dysfunctional, and so is
Really
Patty. And I'm
dysfunctional.
thinking, does anyone get a good relationship
I
education
know.
about relationships? I don't think that's
I
No.
even
don't think
taught in
so. Yeah.
schools.
Maybe
No.
there's might be like a small percentage, but I don't even know about that.
Yeah, I think there's a very small percentage because, look, our parents did what they were taught, right? And we did what we were taught unless we took the time to learn and do it differently.
Right.
And so many people, you just keep going along, going along, going along. I always say, as kids, we live what we know what we lived. And
Yeah.
so we just repeat it or we do the exact opposite, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You
And
go so much in the other direction
go
because
so much
you
the
don't
other
want to be
way.
anything like
Right,
that. So you're
Right,
like,
right.
no. And then it's too
right.
extreme on the other side.
It's
But I
too
think
extreme.
so much of it is like people coming into relationships, not only just like going forward with what they've learned or didn't learn, but also we just all have our own stuff, and that's where you're saying, Jen, like your unhealed trauma and stuff, and so much of our relationships we're just projecting and projecting
That's
and vomiting
right.
our stuff on the other
Well,
person,
you
and that
know,
is yeah,
I mean, that is what happened to me because I got married when I was 21 and I was married
Wow,
for
that's
all of
young.
three. I know. I had no idea what I was doing. And I, of course, got married. And 3 years later, I was like, this isn't working for me. So I just kind of moved out. Just, I
Yeah.
was not very relational at all. And then I decided I would never get married again because it's just too restraining. Like if I don't like somebody, I got to be able to get out of here. So that's what I did. I would be with
That's
someone for a couple of years and then it'd be like, okay, now time to move on. I think I did
yeah.
that like 3 or 4 times before I decided I really didn't know much about relationship and I needed
Yeah.
some help. And
Hmm.
I learned how to do it differently, is what you were talking about, Lisa.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I was a slow bloomer. I was a little tomboy, right? I was into sports. I was, traveling the world with soccer. I was doing like I was that was my focus And then when I got into, relationships, like when I got into a relationship with my husband, I was young, we were in college, and I never saw my parents talk through issues. My dad just got mad, he shut it down. My mom didn't really say anything. And so I was super passive aggressive because my dad's a rager, right? So I couldn't
Yeah,
take him on. But
right.
at the same time, I wanted him to feel I was mad, so I would like not give him a hug. I wouldn't pay attention to him. I do that. And so my poor husband, when we were first in a relationship, he'd be like, do you want to talk about it? I'd be like, no. He's like, are you mad? No.
I'm fine.
It's like, I'm fine, and it like, so I wish I was taught that. I wish my mom said, listen, what you're seeing with your dad and I, this isn't normal. This isn't okay. I want you to know that I should be speaking up to him. I want you to know that it's not okay that he, yells at us. It's not okay that he yells at you. I want you to know that when you're in a relationship, you make sure you meet somebody who can have a conversation with you. You meet somebody who cares how you feel about, and that you meet somebody who's able to be accountable, who's able to apologize, who's able to hear you're upset. And you have to learn how to do that yourself too, Lisa. You got to learn how to be accountable. You have to learn how to have hard conversations. I wish I had that conversation because what I saw was so not that.
That, right.
And then I'm like going into this field and I'm like, oh, I better learn. Lisa, you better learn how to do this because shit, you're going to teach others. And I had to like really figure this out. I had to really learn it, and that wasn't easy. Like I had no role models, and even in our world, we have no role models in our world. Especially for accountability and having hard conversations.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it sounds like we're talking about resources, what you wanted. I mean, like, of course, they don't teach us in school. Like, so what would you say, Lisa, would be a way that people could change, learn, find what's functional, develop, grow relationship rather than to just do what is they knew and they never really, look at it and get conscious about what am I doing in relationship?
yeah,
What would you recommend?
I think first and foremost, you have to have enough humility to slow down
Mhm.
and look at
Nice.
yourself. Right? What's working for me? What like we always want to fix the other person. If this person were, if he or she didn't do dot dot dot, I wouldn't do my move, right? I wouldn't get so mad. I wouldn't have to shut down. And I would say, stop and start looking at what you're doing. How are you reacting in conflict? How are you in this? If you're unhappy in your relationship, you got to look at, well, how are you responding to the things you're unhappy about? Or how are you showing up? Start figuring out what are your edges, right? You have two or three moves that you do when you're at your worst that make you difficult to be in relationship with. Find those. I also would say, listen, the number one most important decision in your life that you're going to make is who you are going to marry, who is going to be your life partner. That's like one of the number one most important decisions. They're going to be with you with life. You better damn well make a wise decision, which means you got to look past all the fluff and what you've been told, and you got to start training yourself to recognize red flags, recognize when the hair on the back of your neck goes up, recognize when you're
Mm.
like ick, recognize when something doesn't feel right, and start relying on you more. So I would say like those two are really big for
Yeah.
just you personally. In terms of resources, stop looking at movies as your go-to, right? Stop looking as your parent at your parents. Start. There's books. Get educated. Start, noticing and with books and therapists and coaches and all those resources, really tune into your gut, like what works for you. You know, I've had clients when it's like they didn't feel like I heard them, or they didn't feel safe with me. I didn't feel like I trusted them, or my work with them didn't fit. I'm like, then find like go someplace else. Trust your instincts, right? And others would be like, oh my gosh, you're so helpful. This is what I need. I've worked with 20 other therapists and nobody's helped me like you. Find people who are your people, who really resonate with you, whose message is, how can I say it? It's a healthy message.
Yeah.
And how do you tell that? Like, you got to get out of black and white thinking, right? If you're in a very religious place, and it's like he's the boss, he runs the house, you got to really look at that. If you have, you're working with a professional and they're like everything's 50-50, and one person's raging and screaming and the other person is people pleasing, that's not a 50-50 move. So I would say have discernment about who you are listening to. We're in a world right now where there is crazy stuff, crazy
Yep.
messages going on, and it's creating like cults that are dangerous and toxic to the people who
Yeah.
are in it
Yeah.
as much as it is to the people who are out of it.
Yeah.
So,
Agreed.
yeah. So how do you guys like how do you discern what's a healthy message or a healthy person for you to listen to
Yeah.
versus not? Because we got to
Yeah, I'm really picky about therapists and people that I
Mhm.
get information from. And I know for me, like I've said, I've been seeing therapists since I was like 10, so I've had a lot of experience with it, but for me, I'm very aware of, like you said, kind of the message. And if they're talking
Yeah.
about accountability in any way, that tells me they know kind of what they're talking about.
Mhm.
When they're kind of encouraging me to really stop and think about what I'm doing and how I'm showing up and how I could be doing that differently. Because
Mhm.
when it's said and done, like we've said, it's not about the other person ultimately in that relationship. It
Right.
is,
It's about
but you have
you.
to start by looking at yourself.
Right.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
for to go to anybody who's going to be like, okay, well, let's figure out how to deal with that person, unless your side of the street is sparkly clean, which it very likely is
Which is very
not.
not true.
It's
Yeah.
very not true. It's
Right.
impossible for your
Yeah.
side. Yeah.
And I think finding somebody, this is my experience, finding somebody who stops and asks questions, who asks for you to go further. So I've had like therapists who um have just brushed things off, like not related to relationships. I went and saw somebody and I was talking about an eating disorder that I have and struggle with and my weight and stuff. And she's like, yeah, but you have a successful business. And I'm like, what the hell does that have to do with anything? Like,
That's funny. Yeah,
yeah.
nothing.
And so for
Yeah.
me, I was like, we're done here, because that doesn't, just because I'm successful in this one area of my life doesn't mean this. So I think really paying attention to how they're responding to you. And for me, a better way would have been, oh, let's talk more about that. Why do you feel that that's a challenge? Or like just asking questions. So I think
Yeah.
that's really helpful. And sometimes if you're looking at like influencers or things like that, who's following them, that what again, I think the message is really important. Are they saying
So important.
Well, I think
something
that,
that's honest?
right. And I think that there are some people, pioneers in relationships that have come out of the last 10, 15 years. Just
Hmm.
like the whole field of psychotherapy has changed. But I was just thinking of course, Terry Real. I was
Hmm.
thinking of of Gottman's, the Gottmans, and their
Yeah.
work. Harville
Yeah.
Hendricks and his work with
Hmm.
his wife. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking of Susan Johnson, who unfortunately has passed away, but
Yeah.
she did a
Her
lot
work is
about,
good. Yeah.
yeah, with type of therapy, relational attachment. And let's
Hmm.
see, who else am I missing?
Richard Schwartz.
Richard Schwartz, IFS, they do couples.
Yeah.
And so those are some, I'm just trying to think of any other
I
ones.
also
Just,
like Brene Brown.
mm-hmm,
I like a lot of her messaging around shame and vulnerability.
mm-hmm,
And leadership in cultures, right?
mm-hmm. So there's
Um,
a lot of
yeah.
forerunners that are out there
Yeah.
Yeah.
talking about healthy relationships. I mean, Pia
Yeah.
Melody, she did that, talked about couples and
Yes.
boundaries.
Right.
So,
Hmm.
And I would
there's,
say just to butt in a little bit here, and while we aren't here to be promotional, I think let's be realistic and say both of you offer really good resources for that type of work. Like, I'm very
Thank you,
serious
Patty.
as far as
thank you.
following. Like, if you want to follow, if you're looking for various people to follow to get these sorts of
Yeah,
messages, both of you I would put on that list.
yeah,
Because you offer obviously a message that I agree with, or I wouldn't be sitting here talking to
yeah,
you both. But there is, I
yeah,
mean, and I think when you start to look, like if you're looking online and social media, you find those lists of people that you both just mentioned, and then see who they're following, see
Yes,
what
that's
content
great.
they're
Hmm.
looking
yeah,
at, because that's
right.
going to
Nice.
form
Hmm.
more. And the more you do that, the more your
Resources.
algorithms are going to show you more of that stuff. And because anybody can say they are a coach or this or that, and they give you very misleading information or very
Yes.
Right.
skewed in a very
So it's important
unhealthy way. So,
to,
Yeah.
yeah.
right,
The
be
other thing I would
discerning.
say that, yeah, the other thing I think that's really important around relationships and learning, like, watch who you surround yourself with. Be
Yeah.
careful about who you surround yourself with. And you want people who are, they have integrity, they have character. They're not like, if you get into a fight with your partner, if your friends are like, oh, they're stupid, or they're this or that, or they're bad, instead of saying, hey, the way you just responded to them wasn't like great. You don't want people who are going to, kind of suck you into a bad lifestyle,
Right.
Drama.
suck you into, being harmful. Like,
Sarcastic, passive
suck,
aggressive, all those things.
yeah, like, pay attention to who you surround. You want to surround yourself with people who are going to help you to rise relationally, and not just, and you want to also help them rise,
Yeah.
like, bring the
Yeah.
best out of each other. Don't do that,
Yeah, it's
you
like
know.
you want to be around people who are calling you in, as I've heard people
Yeah.
say, which is a really
Or
lovely way to
here's
say it.
the classic phrase we say, who holds you accountable? Meaning,
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
simple.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's
And
okay to have a
that's
moment where you're sitting there venting and they're like, "Yeah, screw him." And maybe you should, like,
what's
sometimes you
your
need
side
that
of it?
space helped,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah, that's a great point. People who aren't super dramatic, that's my big thing, is like if you have all sorts of dramas going on in your relationships and all this stuff, you're probably
No.
not a great fit to be in my life as a support system for me, right?
Right, right.
Yeah.
There's one other thing I thought, and I'm curious about what you guys think about this. One message that's always goes around is relationships are hard. And that message drives me crazy
Hmm.
because it normalizes a lot of unhealthy things that shouldn't be a part of relationships. I feel like relationships, especially your marriage, should be much easier than people say. There should be a free flowing way of talking to each other. It doesn't mean you're not going to have problems. It doesn't mean you don't have to pay attention. You don't have to, like, give it special time, but it shouldn't be hard every day where I feel like I can't talk to them, or I'm worried about what he's going to say or what he's going to feel. Relationships should not be like that, I don't think. But I'm curious.
Yeah, I think it's the kind of hard. And I think maybe that for me, because I do think relationships are hard in that they take a lot of work of yourself and showing up, and you have to be very intentional and aware. And so it's hard in that way. It can be challenging.
Hmm.
But I get what you're saying. I think I agree. I don't think it should be like tumultuous all the time and so much going on. But I do think for a long-term relationship to work, it is challenging and it takes work. But unless you're doing regular work and you're paying attention to these things, I think that's where we're going back to some of these examples we're talking about. But I would love to hear Jan's idea of that too.
It's very similar to yours, Patty, but I wouldn't say relationships are hard. I'd say they're more like work and commitment, and
Hmm.
so when you make a commitment, it's like this is a primary thing that I'm going to keep my eye on, just like having
Hmm.
children. And many
Yeah.
people, again, relationships are so essential because that's where we learn so much, being in relationship and what those relationships are. So it's a commitment to always bettering or to really staying aware and to be working. I guess we use the word working on it, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd have to look
Yeah.
at my thesaurus to see if there's a better word for working.
Yeah.
Mindful, being mindful, being
Mindful.
mindful. But I think ultimately, like, it should feel good to come home.
Right.
And if you don't have that, it should feel good to come home, then you got to really, you got to really work that relationship. That's not, we normalize too much bad stuff and say everybody does this, everybody does that. And then people are like, well, relationships are hard, or this is what's going on. And takes work, takes mindfulness, be thoughtful.
Commitment.
Yes. Commitment, definitely. But volatility and, like when we fight all the time, and that relationship should not be like that.
Yeah.
Right. I totally agree with that.
Yeah. Me
Yeah.
too. Yeah. This has been so great. Thanks, Lisa, for coming,
Yeah.
hanging
Thanks,
out,
Lisa, for
and
coming
talking
on your
It's been fun.
vacation.
Yeah.
You're very welcome. It's been fun. It's been
Awesome.
fun.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. If you like what you've heard, please share it with friends, subscribe, and leave a review.
And remember, information shared on this podcast is not medical advice. If you have a concern about your physical or mental health, please seek support from a professional.
If you have a story you'd like to share about things your mother forgot to mention, you can apply to be a guest.
We'd also love to hear a quick 90-second thing you've learned in your life.
You can find links to both of those over at our website at
thingsmymotherforgottomention.com or in the show notes.
Thank you.